Hello everyone and welcome back to another Backlot Banter movie review. My name is Tucker Hazlett. Today I am joined by my co-host Tanner Dykstra, who is none too happy with how this one turned out. And today we're here to talk about the Nun II, I could say long-awaited sequel to the Nun, but I'm not going to say that. That wouldn't be accurate. But if you want to talk to us about the extended Conjuring Universe, the future of all these great characters, you can join our Discord. That link's in the description. And while you're down there, leave a comment letting us know if you prefer the Nun or the Nun II.
Or what's your favorite Conjuring Universe film is, period.
No, I want to keep this Nun specific.
Oh, Nun
right?
Nun-specific. Okay, sounds
good. Tanner, we have seen the Nun II. We sat down, we sat our little white boy asses down, and we viewed the latest adventure that Valak has prepared for us. And how did you feel about the Nun II?
Tucker, I was bored by the Nun II. I think would be the primary
emotion,
the primary feeling I would ascribe to my experience with this film. Following closely in the footsteps of 2018's The Nun, which I also feel is quite a poor film. And I recently watched for the first time The Conjuring 2 just the other night to prepare myself for the introduction. Prepare myself for the introduction of Valak and then her return and the Nun 2. And it really is a night and day difference between the direction and just the energy that different filmmakers can funnel into a Conjuring Universe film. Between James Wan and director
Michael Chaves.
Michael Chaves, thank you. James Wan just has the juice when he's directing horror movies, and I cannot say the same for old Mikey.
Michael Chaves is an interesting director because, as we discovered right before we recorded, he's only done Conjuring Universe feature films, and at least for us, he's done 3 of the worst ones. They're the more recent ones, but The Curse of Ya Llorona, The Conjuring, The Devil May Do It, and now Nun 2. And I agree that the Nun 2 it kind of just feels like another horror movie. It doesn't really do anything exceptional, but I would personally say I didn't find it exceptionally bad in almost any regard, except for maybe like when you really start to think about what's going on in the background, what's the lore of this thing, it gets a little bit muddled. But I thought that it was a totally fine horror movie. I thought there were some elements of it that I liked. I enjoyed the performances from the core cast. They weren't phenomenal, but they served their role well. I thought there were some shots with the camera flowing around that were done quite nicely. There was a few scare and horror moments that I liked, but then there was also just a lot of downtime in this movie. And it's the kind of movie that plods along at such a totally serviceable but not very interesting pace that by the moment they're kind of leading into a last action set piece or horror action set piece, I'm like, are we really, is this already happening? Because it felt like it had gone by so quickly, but because not much had happened. And I think that is really my core problem with this movie. Not that the characters aren't interesting at their base concept, not that Valak's not a villain with an intimidating presence that has an interesting lore behind it. All of this stuff is there and is present in bits throughout the movie. But most of the movie is not that. Is just us kind of going through the motions again and seeing these people go about their day and learning about things once and twice and a third time. And it feels like it pads itself out to, let me get the runtime here.
Hour 50.
Yeah, an hour 50. Which it just is not necessary because it retreads its own ground. And even in that hour 50, almost 2 hour long runtime, we don't feel like we do very much with what we're given.
And I don't want to compare this movie beat for beat to The Conjuring 2, but it's the most recent Conjuring Universe film I've watched. And again, I'm gonna just maybe for the last time compare and contrast them before focusing entirely on the Nun 2, which is that the Conjuring 2 is 2 hours and 15 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's a long film. It was an intimidating runtime when I turned it on. I was like, I don't know if we can sustain this. And we do, and it's always interesting, and we're always changing it up, and we're clipping along at a very good pace. I never feel as though I'm, like, retreading common ground, or that our characters have sort of fallen into a lull at any point. Very well paced from a scripting and directorial standpoint. And the complete opposite is the case in The Nun 2. And at a certain point, I have to ask, if you can't have anything interesting happen for your characters or for your story or for your scares, then why make The Nun 2 other than to sort of fulfill this Conjuring cinematic universe need for a connecting chapter into the next Conjuring movie, Conjuring Last Rites, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, but what's interesting about the Conjuring universe that is mostly a symptom of unfulfilled potential, is that they're only kind of connected. The concepts of these characters exist out in the ether, and we're going to pull on threads and place them where we need to, but the Nun II didn't need to happen. The setup, I guess, at the end of this movie is that Ed and Lorraine Warren find out about Valak, either for the first time or again. It's hard to tell, really.
Okay, so that's the thing. That's the other thing.
But my point is that they are familiar with Valak from the Conjuring 2. And now and we got a Nun movie. Sure, okay, Valak's probably the most intimidating character and one of the most iconic in the universe. Fine, make a movie out of it. Why a second one? And I think that is really my problem with the Nun 2. Is not that it's not a totally serviceable horror movie, and I had a totally fine time watching it. It's nothing really going to stick out to me from it, except for maybe the magazine flipping sequence, which is actually pretty interesting. But for the story of these characters, it doesn't feel like it moves the needle too much, and certainly for the fabric of horror and the extended Conjuring universe, it doesn't do much. It doesn't serve too much of a purpose, other than we now have a 9th Conjuring universe movie.
Yeah. All right, enough talking about the Conjuring CU, the CCU. Let's talk about the Nun II as a film unto itself. Yeah. Let's talk about the primary driving force that should be the case for any modern horror movie, and that is the scares. Yeah. How does it entertain you in the theater, primarily with its horror elements? I'll throw it to you, Tucker. What do you think?
I think that the scares that are there, and the violence, and the use of shadow, and crazy horse shit with the nun in the background, are done pretty well. I think they're done fine. I think there are some that are standout moments. There are some that kind of just pass by and are exactly what you're thinking of. Someone's going to point the flashlight there, and they're going to point it the other direction, and when they point it back third time, boom, there you go. But I think it's good to find in that department. But I think the reason why it doesn't really stick out to me is because it's also just there's not a lot of it. It's a very light on those elements, and which is unfortunate because I see some moments that I'm like, oh, that was pretty cool. Some interesting creature design, some interesting effects. Things are happening very quickly, which gives especially those horror moments a sense of kineticism that the rest of the movie lacks. But it's only in fits and spurts that come up every once in a while, and then we go back away from horror stuff. And a lot of the sequences in this movie, and this isn't a symptom of only this movie, but it feels like characters just kind of wander into situations that are primed to be in a shadow. It's like, okay, you heard the creaking door, you saw the kid run away, you're going to stumble into the thing, and that's going to happen on repeat for most of the movie until we're in a relatively coherent final action sequence where everything is kind of happening in order. But this movie is split between so many characters and parts, which I think is an interesting element of it, having it be sort of an ensemble film in some ways. But it's split so much for that first 2/3 that I can't really tell what the point of the Nun 2 is for so much of this movie. I'm like, where are the characters going? What is the issue? What are they fighting against? What's their goals? And so it's just like characters exist, and they're going to wander around, and they're going to stumble into a situation that's going to make them uncomfortable, and then we're going to see a nun in the background. They're going to stumble over it, and it's rinse and repeat.
Yeah, it is very rinse and repeat. It is very meandering in that way. A lot of this movie is just our characters walk into a dark room or lured into a dark room, and then the nun appears briefly and then disappears. Then somebody walks in and is like, what are you doing here? Well, we got to go to class. I found something that will further the plot, even though not really. It's a lot of that until ultimately, just like 2018's The Nun, we get to our third act action sequence, which is just a dimly lit room where the nun grows really big and tall and is throwing spikes at people or whatever. So really treading the same ground there for me in terms of horror. There were some moments I wouldn't completely disparage the film. There were some moments that moved the needle for the theater audience that we were watching it with, and I was along for the ride there. There's one in particular that isn't necessarily inventive, but it just kind of is a well structured thing where one of the little girls at the school is in this clock tower or something like that, where she sees the nun and then runs down the stairs and then is confronted with her again, and then she disappears. But again, it's all just retreading that same ground of the nun is often there hiding in a shadow that looks like the nun, and then it is her, but then it's not her.
And then the lights come on or someone else comes in, it's like, the fuck is wrong with you? You thought you saw
Yeah.
the Nun, you idiot? There's not
Yeah.
a nun here.
There's no such thing as a nun.
It's a very, very strange movie in that regard because so few of the characters are aware of the presence of something that is terrifying or that it's going to be leading to something that is, I think, where largely the meandering aspect comes from. Is 2/3 of our cast don't know anything's amiss for most of the movie, and it's like that's not particularly satisfying. They don't feel much of a pressure. They don't know anything is going on. They're just kind of going about their days and sleeping in their beds until, holy shit, crazy action sequence at the end. And it is actually more of an action sequence than most horror movies, which I think is another thing that kind of is a letdown for me. The movie does end up boiling down into Valak kind of has like telekinesis powers or can like teleport around and throw people down a hallway, and you know it again, it has like some kinetic energy to it, but it doesn't really feel like a tense horror sequence. It feels like more of an action sequence, and that kind of felt like a Freudian slip earlier. I'm like, oh, I said final action sequence because that's what you usually say because you watch a lot of action movies, but this movie actually does that in a weird, twisted way. And I want to focus in a little bit on the characters and sort of the story progression of this movie, because this is where I think the movie has one of its interesting strengths and weaknesses. Is I like the characters at their core concept. I think that the relationship between our returning character from the last movie, Frenchie, and this little girl, Sophie, is very charming. I think they've got a kind of a unique dynamic because he's always kind of like coming to save her, and he's having these sort of spasms and weird episodes that we come later to learn are caused by him being possessed by Valak from the end of the first movie. I like them. Taissa Farmiga, is that how you say it?
I'm gonna say Taissa.
Taissa Farmiga returning from the first movie. She does a good job. She's got Storm Reid tagging along for the ride. Sophie's mom does a totally serviceable job. And these characters have some interesting backstories and interesting progressions, and they're performed really well. But I think the problem is that almost none of them tie into where the movie ends up. Storm Reid is kind of just there along for the ride. Sophie's mom is there because she's a teacher. Sophie's there because she knows she's friends with Frenchie.
Is that Sophie's mom, or is it just a kind teacher?
No, definitely her mom.
Okay, do they say that? I didn't catch that. If they say that,
because Frenchie's like, oh, you should be proud. She's a wonderful young girl, like.
I don't know. I think that might be just because she's a teacher.
But they're always spending time together. She calls her sweetheart and stuff.
They definitely have the girl always spending time together.
That's a great point. Yeah. Well, but regardless, this group of characters is they're solid. I'd watch more of them if the situation arose. But the way that the plot progresses, and we learn about the fact that the nun is back, and Sister Irene is going to hunt her down, and she's at the school, and these things just kind of. It's a lot of happenstance. It's a lot of, boy, I'm sure glad this character was around in this scene so that they knew the exact right thing that's going to push us on to the next scene.
I know a guy that can help us out.
Exactly.
Here.
Oh, I just happen to know about that. Oh, no, I know a guy that knows about that. It's a lot of, instead of naturally progressing from scene to scene, we're sort of flipped to the next scene by, a convenient reason why we're going to be able to move on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that anyone in the cast was bad necessarily, but I mean, Tucker, in 2018, I could probably have done without seeing them in another film, and in 2023, I can also do without seeing them in another film. I think they're probably done. I feel like the Conjuring Universe might be winding down.
I think so.
But we never really know, do we?
No, God no.
We might have another horror side character gimmick up our sleeve that we can make a trilogy out of. Hopefully it's the samurai suit from the Warrens room. But interestingly, I think that's another thing as well, is that the films with the Warrens at their center always have that like investigative bent about them. I was like, these people have experienced hauntings before, they've also experienced hoaxes before, and they're here to try and figure out if what they're dealing with is real or if it's not. Yeah. And that's always an added interesting point. We, of course, know it's real, but like, especially, I said I wasn't going to do it, but I'm going to do it again. With The Conjuring 2, it's very much like, you can see how the Warrens being there, they might understand that this could all be a hoax. Sure. And then when you peel that away, it is just a bare basics horror movie that doesn't provide a lot in the way of added interest or added character intrigue or plot intrigue. It's just a lot of like MacGuffin thing. In this one, it's a little steel can that
boring goober in this movie
that repels the nun, but also if the nun gets it, then she's more powerful.
Yeah, very strange. Very strange. And the lore behind it could be interesting, but they explain it in the most surface level way, and then it just becomes the glowing goober by the end of the movie. And I think that, again, we're talking about why this movie kind of ends up feeling formulaic and just like another horror movie. Again, none of this is done specifically badly. But it's done so by the numbers. You're going to find the thing that's going to get away the bad guy, and the bad guy going to show up, and the characters are going to stumble into the dark room, and they're going to think they see something, and then there's a thing that's not there, but that was there, and there's not. Yeah. It very much follows beats. And I think that you're right that it does end up lacking that spark of energy that makes the Conjuring universe distinct, which is the interconnectedness, is the Warrens, is the fact that these things are part of this larger canon. But again, this movie feels like it does the exact same thing as that first movie and doesn't contribute very much. And then because it is lacking that Warren touch, I feel like it could make up in that Sister Irene has experienced this before, and she's supposed to be sort of hunting this down, but that is a very minor part of this movie. Where she gets a like inciting incident where a bishop or something comes to her church and is like, "You're the only one who's experienced this before. We need to send you to get rid of the nun."
Yeah.
And then she like goes to one guy, and then she knows where it is. And so it's like maybe 5-6 minutes of the total screen time of the movie.
They try to do an investigative, like, pieced into the puzzle together element, but they don't give it enough time because we have to keep cutting back to the school where the scary stuff is happening. Story, yeah. And so it doesn't give it enough time to develop, and they don't even try to give it any energy or coherence in the script. But not to Tucker, if you don't remember the Nun 2018, not to worry.
Not really.
Because they give you a succinct like summary of what happens via like some nuns at this one abbey
telling a campfire story ostensibly
about the plot of the nun, and Taissa Farmiga is there, and she's like, "Oh, that's
real.
me."
Yeah.
What should we talk?
She was standing in the corner like, they don't know I was the person that stopped the nun.
Should we talk spoilers here for a second?
Sure.
Talking about potentially how this will tie into the Conjuring 4, and then also a specific thing to the end of the film that I did enjoy, but I think it is a bit of a surprise. So scores and then spoilers?
Spoilers and scores. Come on.
Okay, fine.
Keep it in.
Spoilers. I'll start off simple. There's a goat man that shows up.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the goat man. Hey, listen, I like the reveal of the goat man as he's like at the top of this big spiraling staircase, and Storm Reid says, "What the hell?" And then he like starts running down the stairs. I'm like, that's good stuff. I like that. And after that scene, I feel like they heavily misused that character, or misused that like monster.
Yeah.
As we have to keep cutting back to the nun being big and tall and having spikes out of the ground or whatever. Because they do that one interesting thing with him, and then kind of don't touch him from there.
Yeah, no, it is very strange. I agree that I like it design wise. I just don't think it fits in the movie because they don't. They try to set it up to this little game that the kids play about the devil and the goat, and so then we're sat there questioning, is this actually somehow the devil? Is it Valak projecting something? But it seems to have a physical presence in the way that other things that Valak projects don't. Yeah. Why is it involved in this one specific place? Maybe it's a guardian of the eyes that also have a baseline setup but don't really turn into anything other than... I think you're right. The one thing that this movie does contribute to the Conjuring canon is that the idea that Valak is chasing down people that are descendants of Saint Lucia, who she had her eyeballs taken out, and they're putting a little fucking Altoids can that they hid in the
exactly it is an Altoids can,
but it's not clear. They do a little bit of parallelism. They do a little bit of parallel editing, a little bit of throwing it back to something we learned 10 minutes ago to make sure we stitch them together. But even within that, they still don't. It's still not clear to me what the point of all of this was. What Valak came back because Valak put a slug in Frenchie's mouth at the end of the
Yep.
first one, which I forgot happened, but I'm sure it did.
Couldn't tell you.
But then she's also still there, even though, like, because she's shown up in other places. So why did she need to send the slug into his mouth?
Why did she need to, like, travel?
But now she's
Europe?
like completely burned to a crisp. So how is she gonna come back again? Because she definitely does.
Come back into Conjuring 2?
Yeah, it's very strange, and it I'm sure there is a lore there, but this movie doesn't concern itself with that. It concerns itself with these characters are running away from a thing that's spoken them, and then we're going to burn the thing that's spoken them.
Yeah. I presume that, having just watched The Conjuring 2, the last time I'll bring it up, that Valak does seem to, like, have it out for Lorraine Warren.
Yeah.
For Vera Farmiga. So I assume, even though they didn't touch that at all in 3, that it'll come back in 4 after we've done some of the groundwork here in the Nun II about, like, she's hunting down the descendants of St. Lucia, and Irene is a descendant of St. Lucia, and of course she is portrayed by Taissa Farmiga, who is the younger sister of Vera Farmiga. So presumably those two characters will be related, and thus that's how we round it out in The Conjuring Last Rites, is that we have a final face-off with Valak, and maybe probably also Satan or something like that. Who's to say? Sure. I don't know. Maybe the Goat Man comes back. Please, God, let the Goat Man come back. But yeah, like, it's all very loose, and the Conjuring Last Rites might not even be real. It might not even be a real movie that's going to come out. They're saying that it is right now, but who's to say, really? Patrick Wilson's off directing movies now, so I don't know. Maybe he'll direct a Conjuring movie here with the fourth Conjuring movie as well. But yeah, it's all very loose, and ultimately, even though I just kind of tried to piece it together there, I don't care.
Yeah, sure. Totally fair. Tara, we'll be back for whenever they do more of these, but I'd say we're on at the moment, downhill slope. This movie didn't do much for me. Devil Made Me Do It was a huge letdown for me personally. Yeah. But Tara, what score would you give the Nun II?
Yeah, 3.5 out of 10.
Yeah, okay, all right. I'm a little bit nicer towards my horror movies, so I'm gonna go a little bit higher, but it's not gonna be that much higher. I was in the theater watching this, and I'm like, I'm gonna give this a good score. Like, this is an above average movie. But the more I think about it, the less it makes sense coherence wise. The less its pacing and its structure pay off in my mind. And again, it just doesn't seem to fulfill very much purpose other than put out another movie in the franchise. So even though I am a little bit nicer, it's not that much nicer. I'm going to go 4.1 out of 10.
Yeah, it is, like, at best average is what you can say about the Nun 2.
And if you're not paying attention, if you're just there to, like, just be in a dark room and be spooked occasionally, it does its job. But it doesn't do more than that. And it could have. Right. And that's why I'm just let down by leaving the Nun 2. Yeah. Oh, well.
Processing the Nun, it's quite a complex, dense film.
Yeah. I felt dense while watching it.
My eyelids were feeling dense, I'll tell you that much.
My top eyelids were so dense they were drooping towards my bottom eyelid.
Is this part called your eyelid? This bottom part here?
Isn't that like a set of eyelids, top and the bottom one?
I've never heard anyone call them top and bottom, but you might be right.
What would the bottom part be?
I don't know, man. I'm not a fucking doctor.
I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Much to consider. The Nun is pushing us to learn biology.
Hey, I wouldn't have guessed it, but sometimes cinema's magic like that.
Movies are dreams.